Welcome to the best of first-person episodes from Phantoms and Monsters. Please like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon so you'll be notified of all future uploads.
Scared to death. It was the summer of 2004. At the time I was selling real estate in Warren County, Virginia, but mostly in the Front Royal, Virginia area. The vicinity is known more for the Shenandoah Valley, as well as its history during the American Civil War. It seems that most of the older property has a story behind it, and it's usually tied to the Civil War. I moved there in 2000, not long after I graduated from college. Real estate sales was not my first choice for a career, but I was doing well, so I decided to see how far I could go. In March 2004, a house with many acres of farm property was listed for sale. The former resident had recently passed away and the family was selling it. From what I gathered, none of the relatives wanted to take over the property, and it was decided that it be sold as soon as possible. On the day I first toured the old place, it was obvious that the previous owner took very good care of it. It was quite a nice house with an old barn, a smokehouse and a large greenhouse. A nephew of the former owner accompanied me during the inspection. He assured me that there would be no attempts by any family member to impede a sale, and that everything in the house was to be sold as is. All furniture, appliances, tools, etc. were to be included in the sale. I explained to him that they would most likely realize more profit if the items were removed for sale in an auction, but he insisted it must be sold as is, and that the buyer would be responsible for the contents. I thought this was quite odd, but I promised that I would do as the sellers wanted. To my surprise, the property was listed for only 3 weeks. The overall housing market was starting to get very tight, and large properties were difficult to sell. But, in fact, I made the sale to a couple from Washington, D.C., who was the second party that showed interest. They made a counteroffer which was quickly accepted by the sellers. Everything went quite smooth, though the day of settlement was a bit strange. The nephew and his sister were representing the sellers. Their demeanor was very distant and cold during the entire procedure. At one point, the buyers asked the nephew if there was any property in the house that he would like to keep. The nephew gave them a glaring look and told them that he didn't care if they burned it all. Several weeks later, the new owners invited me for dinner in their new home. They were quite proud and wanted to tell me about the history of the place. It was once owned by a former British officer who had defected and fought with the colonists during the Revolutionary War. Later it became a working farm and remained so until the 1950s, when it was purchased by a Pentecostal preacher and his wife. The couple was considered quite eccentric, and the preacher never had a large congregation. The new owners were told by an attorney who lived nearby that the preacher held worship services in the barn because there was never a church. There were many rumors of strange rituals being performed during these services. It was a very enjoyable evening, and we agreed to get together again. I really did like this couple. They were very intelligent and quite polite. The husband worked for the federal government, and the wife was a pharmaceutical representative. They had grown tired of the urban lifestyle in Washington, D.C., and wanted a home where they could relax. One thing I did notice was that much of the furniture and appliances left in the house remained and was being used by the new owners. On the July 4th weekend, the couple invited me to join their cookout. My boyfriend was staying with me for the week, so he decided to come along. I hadn't seen the couple in over a month, and was very interested to know how life in their new home was going. When we arrived, instantly I knew something was wrong. We started walking towards the back of the house and noticed that no one other than the couple were there. I asked if we were the first to arrive and was told that none of their friends accepted the invitation. We sat down in the lawn chairs and started to talk. They both looked worried, though I didn't understand what was going on. I'm a very direct person, so I asked if there was anything wrong. The wife looked at me and explained that none of their friends would come to the house anymore, and that they had all had bad experiences when visiting. She started to get more specific and said that they thought the property was haunted. I tried not to laugh, but the smile quickly came to my face. I looked back at both of them. They were deadly serious and not smiling. They said that something tried to push people down the stairs and that a bad odor would permeate the living room for a few minutes, then fade away. They also heard screaming sounds outside at night and thought it may have been coming from the barn. As well, they were both having dreams about dead bodies buried in the greenhouse and barn. I had never experienced anything paranormal while on the property, so I simply dismissed it. The day went by without an incident and, in fact, it was quite enjoyable. It was starting to get late, and I needed to get up early the next morning, so we thanked them for their hospitality and drove home. I really didn't think much about what I was told and quickly went to sleep that night. The next morning I woke early and got myself together because I had several homes scheduled to show that day. I needed to first stop by the office so I could pick up the newest listings. When I arrived at the office, I noticed a police car in the parking lot. I walked into the office and was immediately approached by the office manager and told that the authorities wanted to talk to me. I introduced myself to the police officers and asked what was going on. One of them handed me a photograph of the couple. They were lying on the ground, side by side and obviously dead. They were both very pale, like all the blood had been drained. I acknowledged that I had sold them the property and that we had socialized the previous day. He explained that their bodies were found by a police officer the previous night after a 911 call was placed for a disturbance, and that they were found laying in the barn as seen in the photo. The only information I could provide was what they told me and that they thought the property was haunted. Over next few days I was told that they both died from natural causes and that there would be no further investigation. That's all I was ever told and that's all I would ever find out. I asked a physician if it was possible that two people could be scared to death at the same time. The look he shot back at me was of utter bewilderment, which was followed by laughter. He said that it was practically impossible to scare a person to death, let alone two people at the same time. Since that incident I moved to the West Coast and no longer sell real estate. I know their deaths will haunt me for the rest of my life. I wouldn't feel so bad if I hadn't dismissed what they said so quickly and so out of hand. I feel that something on that property frightened them so bad that it resulted in their deaths. JL.
Man in Black Hoodie haunting. Until I got married I was always on the fence about ghosts. According to my parents we lived in a haunted house and I had some odd experiences. I had always believed in God but was unsure of ghosts until I got married. When I got married my wife and I moved into a nice little townhouse. When we originally were looking at it I got a strange vibe in the place. I took it as nerves. When we moved in the feelings got worse. It always felt like something was there. I would always hear what sounded like talk radio in our place. Whenever I laid my head down I would hear it. As soon as I sat up you could not hear it. I would hear footsteps in my room when I would be downstairs by myself. While all this was going on I had just started working in a soap factory. I worked third shift. On my shift we would all see this man in black. It looked like a man in a black hoodie with black glasses. He would always kind of power walk past the room we worked in. After a few months I noticed this black figure was gone. We all noticed it and thought nothing of it. A few weeks later it was Thanksgiving and I was on my way to my mom's. I forgot my wedding ring and ran back to my place. As I ran inside I closed the door behind me but not completely. I was the only one there. It was closed to a crack. When I came back downstairs I went to pull the door open, but it would not budge. Not only did the door close completely but the deadbolt activated. My wife and I never used the deadbolt because it was so hard to activate. A few weeks later I was getting ready for work when I seen the man in black pass from my guest room past my bathroom into my bedroom. He was moving swiftly. From there on things kicked into high gear. The feeling of being watched got worse. You know that feeling as a kid you got when you pissed off your parents and you could tell they were mad. That was how the atmosphere was in my place. My alarms would change. I originally used to have 3 alarms to wake me up. I am not good at getting up. One particular incident all my alarms were set for buzzer and I woke up an hour after they went off. Alarms were set to radio and turned all the way down. One night I came home early from work. My wife got up out of bed and as she was gone I noticed what looked like shadows of trees swaying on my way. I immediately got scared because there were no trees behind my place and it was not windy outside. In fact, as soon as my wife came back, the shadows were gone. I was wide awake when this happened. It was too early to sleep. I also began to have a reoccurring nightmare of being held down in my bed by this little girl. I refused to sleep in our room. Keep in mind it was daylight out. Even if my wife was home, I would not sleep upstairs. During the day when I would try to sleep on the couch, I would hear footsteps upstairs. No one was home. It got to a point where I never slept anymore. One night after my wife and had just got over an argument, I laid down upstairs against my will. I was wide awake when my foot grabbed. I looked over and my wife was curled up asleep. It was not long after that incident we moved out. Even though my wife really had no incidents, I was becoming a wreck. I had other experiences after this, but it never felt like I was being personally targeted like I was in our townhouse. JM.
The zombie ghost on Roberts Road. This happened in 1992. It was around 3 in the morning. I was coming home from a party with a friend. We were driving down Roberts Road, and I know you're thinking Resurrection Mary, but this has nothing to do with her. There was somebody standing by the curb with a lantern, and he got in front of the car, and we slowed down. He walked toward the car. We looked, he had on, it was February, he had, like one of his arms was out, like a bandage was hanging. It was stained to look like blood or whatever. This was really gruesome looking. His mouth was agape. His eyes were like rolled in back of his head. His leg was missing, and you could see like a translucent face through him. We just looked at each other and were just like, whoa. We drove on. He walked in back of the car and the other car, we looked in back, and the other car went right through him. Went right through him. We both saw it and he was right by the side of us. We drove and he continued to walk across the street and there was another cemetery, it was Bethany, he was walking to the other cemetery. And there was another car in back that drove right through this apparition. I mean, it blew me away for like a year. I'm telling you. Spooked. That was the most spooked out one I've ever been. I mean, I had a witness. We called Justice Police, but they didn't want to get into it, and then I called a famous Chicago-based paranormal investigator.
Deadwood's Phantom Dentist. When I was in college, I worked at one of the most haunted radio stations in America. I didn't know that when I took this job. I was an overnight DJ at a classic rock station. It was K-Sky Radio in Deadwood, South Dakota. The address, believe it or not, dead serious, was 666 Main Street, Deadwood. We thought it was a portal for ghosts because of the strange address in Deadwood, South Dakota, 666 Main Street. But everybody that worked at that radio station knew about a ghost named Not Smiley. He was a dentist from the 1880s to the 1920s in Deadwood, and he had an old practice at the location of the radio station, on the second floor, or where the radio station was located. We were located right across from the number 10 saloon where Wild Bill Hickok was shot and killed by Jack McCall, you know, in the 1800s. There was a lot of history in that town, a lot of people met untimely deaths in Deadwood, South Dakota. That's why I think there were a lot of ghosts in that town, too. And one of them used to hang out at the radio station and do crazy things at night. You remember the old AP teletype machines? One night we were there and the dentist office was converted into a newsroom, and through double-pane glass, we saw a man standing there in Old West garb. We thought that was pretty strange, as we walked around the corner and nobody was there. He was gone. And then another time we were working there, for whatever reason, whenever we played Led Zeppelin's Whole Lotta Love, things would kinda kick up at that radio station. Crazy things would happen. We would have clocks on the wall would turn upside down. The old cards that we used to play that had commercials on them, we find them stacked weird or turned upside down. Just all kinds of stuff. Remember how we used to stack those? Well, they would be all changed around as soon as you walked out of the room and came back. So it was just crazy things like that used to happen when you worked overnight at that radio station. Through the corner of your eyes, you'd see dark figures walking down the hall, doorways would creak and slam by themselves. One night I was working late during a blizzard, and about 3:30 in the morning I heard a really loud demonic roar come from down the hallway, so I thought it was one of my friends playing a trick on me. I went running down the hall to see if I could catch him. I walked down the stairs, I looked out the door, and there was no tracks or anything in the snow, so I knew that nobody else was at the station other than me, so it kinda freaked me out the rest of the night.
This is Lon Strickler. If you like this program, it would help us if you would give it a thumbs up. Then subscribe and click the bell icon so you get notification when we upload new first-person encounters. We have many more to come very soon. And by the way, if you have a suggestion or an experience of your own, please leave a comment.